Hey guys and girls, Board now back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 5, Episode 5. It is called Mirrors, and I will be going into full spoilers just to warn you. So I think we're halfway through the final season now, because I heard somewhere that it was a shorter season, so I think there's only 10 episodes this time. Halfway through then, and boy, this episode was really bad as well. Like, it just doesn't pick up any pace this season. This episode was very tedious, and once again it really goes into areas where it's being this very cheesy on the nose Star Trek show, where it's definitely doing things that don't feel like Star Trek. Like, in this episode, it goes full-blown sort of melodrama and full-blown, with the backstory between Moore and Locke, it goes full-blown, it's almost like a Romeo and Juliet or Beauty and Beast style thing, and it's like, what the hell is this doing in a Star Trek show? So, the main plot for the episode is then Book and Michael go into this wormhole because the next clue is in the wormhole, and they're expecting the Moore and Locke are already there to find the clue. So it's this high risk sort of mission, but Michael and Book are the two who decide to go in, because that way you're not risking the whole crew by having the ship go in. And when they go inside, it turns out to be like a mirror type universe, and they find this other version of the Starship Enterprise, and it's a model which Michael doesn't recognise. Once again, this is tying into this whole mission having to do with the past and to be with how they were created. So it's an early version of the Enterprise which Michael doesn't know about. And it's a way for them to discover more about the characters from the past and about, like, the lore of it. But it turns out that's the ship that Moore and Locke are on, and it's the ship where you've got this clue. So once again, it's getting more into Book's relationship and connection to Moore than, like, his grandfather was her father, and he's going to try and use that, of course, to try and connect with her. And that's when we get this backstory to do with Moore and Locke. So, first of all, the setup of the episode is, it feels very rinse and repeat. It feels very much like we've already done these scenes between Michael and Captain Rayner several times already in this season. So we get a scene where Rayner objects to Michael going on the mission. And this is something Michael does a lot, and something which other people have questioned. Why does she go on these missions where she's the captain? And she just feels, well, she's the best one to go, and she chooses Book because he's got this personal connection with Moore, and they both feel then that actually makes him qualified, whereas Rayner questions it and says that's more of a negative for me. But they have this back and forth conversation where she convinces him then he can run the ship. He's a good person to take charge. Use your experience, that kind of thing. But it just feels like a flat scene, because we've already had at least a couple of similar scenes, and these characters never seem to learn. They're just at each other's throats once again. And another reason this episode is quite frustrating is because until very late in the episode, you barely see the other crew, like the other members. And this is another episode where it conveniently drops in all these like minor characters on the bridge, like characters that you don't see that often, or if you do see them, like they're just off in the background and they're not really doing much. But Tilly, who's one of the best characters in the show generally, I think has done bugger all this season. Like, they've hardly done anything with her. And in this episode, they don't really do anything with her. Like, there's one scene late on in the episode where she talks to the doctor. I forget his name now. His name's gone out of my head. But they have quite what's meant to be quite a profound conversation about his near-death experience, about his relationship with Paul, and she's sort of being like a sounding board for him. And there's also a little bit of when they have to solve the problem at the end, she plays a little bit of a part in that, but really Tilly's very in and out of the episode. But yeah, it's just weird because you get this stuff early on with Adira where she's feeling, he's feeling guilty because of his role in the time loop thing from last week. And once again, you get Raina being very passive aggressive with him and Stannons, and his thing about stop giving me these really rambling science type things, just speak English, and just getting really impatient with them. And again, it sort of feels like, well, we've already been here several times. But it's just this weird thing where you get a little bit at the start of the episode, and then they don't really come back into play until the end of the episode. And it just feels like this clunky thing where it's literally like, well, here's your scene, guys. We're going to wheel you back in, and you've got to solve this scientific problem. You've got to find a way to open the wormhole long enough for Michael and Book to come back through it. And there's a little bit of, they're trying to build a little bit of tension with that, because they say at one point, we can only open the wormhole and keep it open for a matter of seconds. So if they don't come back through, then that's probably it. But it just feels like this really contrived sort of scene where we've hardly seen them in the episode, and you, like I said, you just wheel them back out. So the main bulk of the episode is Michael and Book on this ship, and the more I see Michael and Book in this series, the least I like their relationship. Like, because I think they are just going through the motions at this point, the characters and all this implied and forced drama. Because at one point, Michael is hesitating to tell Book about the whole thing last week with the time bug, and she implies, and there was some surprising things, but because one of those things was her and Book and how they were actually happy, or it plays out that they're happy in the future, she doesn't want to tell him. Like, she resists the urge and just stuff like that. But also her saying, oh, there was some surprises, and it's like, well, really? Because I watched the episode and it didn't seem that surprising to me. So I'm kind of getting fed up now with their kind of drama and just how on the nose everything is and the way it's being played out. And later on, she does tell him, she eventually says, you were in one of the future timelines, and it turns out we are happy in the future. And once again, it bugs me a bit because Michael's breaking all sorts of time travel rules. Then you're not really supposed to say what happens in the future. Maybe that's not a rule in this show, I don't know, but that is one of the basics of time travel, as I understand it from other TV and film. So as I said, the main bulk is on the ship, the stuff with Moore and Locke. We get some pretty bland action scenes, some back and forth between the pair, where there's certain things in this episode where you can see that maybe there's a good idea in there, which if it was played a bit better, if the writing was a bit better, then it could really work as a good idea, because they try and do this thing where Michael and Booker are presented as almost what Moore and Locke are. That they're very troubled and they're sort of renegades and they're kind of on the wrong end of things. And they both try and paint it as that, and they have these individual scenes where they're like separated, because at one point they decide that maybe they're both there for the common goal of getting to this clue. So they at one point they do decide to work together. And that's where you get them like paired off, and of course Book gets paired off with Moore, because they were always going to do that. And once again he's trying to appeal to her sentimental side, and she throws it back in his face because she says, well, I hated my father. So, but he's constantly giving her really tedious speeches. And then yeah, there's stuff where Michael's trying to talk Locke into, because they're both trying to talk the other one into giving themselves up, because they're saying, we can help you that way, we can make special arrangements, it doesn't have to be like that. And they're both being like really aggressive, and there's just certain moments where it feels like they're being aggressive for the sake of being aggressive, not because there's actually a reason to be. So it's in this part, as I said, where you get this backstory where it explains Moore and Locke and how they first met and the whole relationship. And we find out in the episode that Moore is of Breen descent, and so she's got a certain generic condition and defect, and that's why she's on this mission. Basically, that's why she's looking for this clue to help her find a cure. And it turns out her and, well, as we know, her and Locke are on the run together, and in these flashbacks it shows, and she's obviously like a pirate, like a, I forget the name for a space, but like a pirate type thing, and that she came across Locke years ago, and she sort of started making deals with them if they didn't like arrest her, and so she dealt with him, and they build up a flirtation, and she starts to get to know him. And this is what I couldn't believe. First of all, in a way, the flashbacks don't really serve that much of a purpose, because we don't actually need them. Like, there's nothing in these flashbacks that couldn't really just be explained or implied. I think you could lose the flashbacks and they wouldn't affect the episode. But also, I couldn't believe some of the stuff in the flashbacks, because as I said, it plays out as like a melodrama, and it plays out almost like a Beauty and the Beast style thing, where, because he's got a helmet on originally, and they do this whole thing about him having two faces, and like slowly Moore encourages him to show his other side, and they're kind of saying that then she's opened up to him so he can open up to her, and that's how they fall in love. But you just get these ridiculously over the top romantic type scenes in the middle of a Star Trek episode, and also you just wonder why we are spending so long with these two characters, why you're giving a backstory to these villains. And it all seems to be ramping up, so I thought they were gonna conclude their plot in this episode, or at least come to some sort of a resolution, and maybe there's still a bit more to tie up later, but it doesn't really do that in the end. Once again, it feels very anticlimactic because eventually when they come out of the wormhole, they just escape in like a pod. And that's it for this episode. And Michael says, don't worry, Book, we can track them. So to be continued again. But once again, it feels like a very flat anticlimactic type thing. And you've got this whole thing with Locke where him and Michael get into a fight at one point, and so she wounds him in self-defense, and he's on the verge of dying really, but like he's still giving her a long speech even though he's dying. And when Maul comes back and sees this, that obviously sets her off again. But those flashbacks were so bad, like they were just so cheesy. And once again, you've got these two characters who I think have been okay as villains, especially Maul, and like her performance I've quite enjoyed, and they're not too bad overall, but I'm not sure I really want this romance between them and this whole backstory. I don't think you really need that. And even with Maul, at times in this episode, she's bashing out the one-liners again, like, which does make it feel like she's a very sort of sassy, sort of sexy female action type, well, villain particularly, but it's like, yeah, just, there's one or two good bits of humour, but like, do we really need her to be making one-liners and little gags? Like, when she's in the past, it's in one of the flashbacks, like she's making a gag about how, hey, I'm Maul and I like long walks on the beach, or just something like that it was. And there's a couple of like sparky one-liners like that, which is like, yeah, I'm not sure this quite fits. And those flashbacks were really drawn out as well. And by the end, it just feels like there's nothing really that much resolved. And this episode, once again, does a good job of really making me dislike Michael and Book as a relationship. Like, their relationship is getting worse as we go along compared with what it was, because definitely in the earlier episodes with them together, I was quite enjoying their dynamic and the relationship, but it just feels like they're just running through the same beats, and it's gotten really stale at this point. So that's Star Trek Discovery for another week. Thanks for listening. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media, and you can support me on patreon.com/boardnow for some extra perks, and for just $1 a month if you want to unlock early access to things, exclusive commentaries, and other exclusives. So thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you again soon.